Whatever industry you pick, if you outwork everybody, if you try to be a little smarter than everybody, if you try to be a better salesperson than everybody, if you try to be better prepared than everybody, you've got your best chance. Because if you don't do it, and somebody else does, I have this saying, work like someone is trying to take it all away from you. Work like someone is spending 24 hours, working 24 hours to take it all away from you. And that's kind of the way I look at it. What would you say is the number one reason why people fail? Lack of brains, lack of effort. Lack of brains, lack of effort? Yeah, they don't do the work, they don't learn, When you walk in the room, when you start a business, and you start to talk about somebody, you're never in a vacuum with no competition. Unless you're just extremely lucky, and if there's going to be competition, that means somebody else knows your business as well as you do when you get started. And if you walk into a competitive environment and they still know more about the business than you do, more about your customers, you're gonna lose. But most people don't consider that. They don't do the work, they don't learn more about their industry, they don't know even about their business. And so you've gotta put in the effort to know more about your industry than anybody else. And that's the brains part, and that's the effort part as well, because look, if you're competing with me, you better know what you're doing, otherwise I'm gonna kick your butt, you're not gonna outwork me. And so, the combination is usually what kills businesses early on more than anything else. You could, within a 10, 15-minute interview, say, this dude is not going to make it as an entrepreneur. Yeah, I can typically tell. Right. I can tell by their passion, I can tell by their focus, I can tell by their preparation. There's a whole realm of things in any business. Here's the business you're in, and here's 1,000 things that influence whether or not you're gonna be successful. Through my experience in businesses, I can put myself in his position and say, okay, here are 900 to the 1,000 things he has to be aware of. And then go through and ask, and by how many of those or her issues they've been able to address already, that kind of gives me a sense of how hard they're willing to work. And I can tell by the questions they ask me. So all I have to do is say, okay, what do you want to know? And when they start saying, what should I do? They ask you. Yeah, and that's fine, right? And I want them to ask questions, but people like to say, the only stupid questions are the ones you don't ask. And that's not right? Because the questions you ask tell whoever more about you than anything else you do. Because in particular, it tells me about your preparation. If you ask me questions about just basic things that you should have known and you should have down to a science, that's gonna disqualify you almost more than anything. If you're not always learning, if to this minute, if I'm not continuously learning, if I'm not just absorbing as much as I can absorb, someone else is gonna kick my butt, right? So you talked about paranoia. The greatest source of your paranoia should be knowledge. If someone else knows more than you do, and if you're not learning, if you don't know to learn, if you don't know how to learn, if you don't have a thirst for learning and acquiring information, you're SOL. Do you think there needs to be a healthy level of paranoia? Absolutely. There needs to be? Oh yeah, I always say, for every one of my businesses, I say, what would I do to kick my own butt? Right? So whatever business you have, there's somebody trying to put you out of business. There's somebody trying to take a bite out of your business. And it's better for you to figure out how they're gonna do it rather than they do it. And so, yeah, that's being paranoid. And so you have to be paranoid. You have to anticipate other people's next moves. And you can't ever, downplay the competition. I was at a business plan competition this morning at a college, and they were kind of being dismissive of the competition. And so you can't ever do that. They're out there trying to take you down, and they're not just gonna sit still. And if you're good, really, really good, you're going to inspire them to work even harder, faster, better. And so you have to be, very self-aware of what you're good at and what other people are good at. And, a healthy dose of paranoia makes a big difference. It's very helpful. Let's transition to a different subject with college. You went to IU? Yep. Right now, you got a lot of people that say, forget about school, drop out of school. They're idiots. They're idiots. So you think they're idiots? Tell me why. If you're going to have and run a business, if you don't understand accounting, you're already behind the 8 ball. Can't you hire a guy that knows how to run? But then they still have to communicate to you. Your accountant might tell you you're profitable, but your cash is going down. You know, not understanding that breakdown. And when you don't, do you think you need college to learn that? Yeah, I think you do, right? Because it may not, for some people, look, if you're so self-motivated that you can take an online course in accounting and teach yourself everything, you're way ahead of the game anyways. But most people aren't. I don't care if you go to a community college and take accounting and spend 99 bucks for the class, just, you know, spending the money forces you to be more obligated to do it. But accounting, finance, lesser extent, marketing, sales if the school offers that, these are all, that's the language of business. And so while it's possible to teach yourself these things, and while it's possible to hire them when you're starting your own company, you don't want to have to spend money hiring an accountant. Well, let me tell you about, if you've gone through all these classes probably, you don't have to hire a lawyer to incorporate, right? You can probably figure it out yourself. And so your cost of opening up a business drops. But even more important than all that, that's the blocking and tackling. That's the language of business. You know, the thing I learned at Indiana that was more important than anything else, I learned how to learn. And learning became far more important to me because the one certainty in business is that it's always going to be changing. How does one entrepreneur increase the speed and areas that they can increase? There's certain things you can't control. Speed in what way? Speed of growing your business. All right? So how fast can I grow? Yeah, I mean, it just depends. You've got to know your own skill set, right? You've got to know how that fits within your company's life cycle to grow. You know, some companies are slow grind, and you just have to understand that, and you've just got to bide your time until it starts to click and then grow with it quickly. You know, if you're trying to release a product that needs to be ubiquitous, you've got to go as fast as you can and then, you know, release the product. Yeah. And you know, there's a lot of people who say, you know, perfection is the enemy of profitability, right? And that doesn't mean you have to wait until it's a perfect product. It really just depends on what the product is. Is it, you know, a barber shop, right? Is it an app? Is it a service? Is it a product? But, you know, the key is looking for the low-hanging fruit. What customers are willing to write you a check or commit to it, you know, so that they're willing to integrate it into their daily lives or integrate it into their daily business. And so getting a commitment, either through time or revenue, is typically what I look for. And so if I can get a commitment, then I'm going to be able to learn. I'm going to see how they use it so they sustain usage. And then once I get the next one, you know, hopefully it came a little bit faster than the first one, then I can ask for referrals. And then the next one, then the next one. And I just try to ramp it up. You know, when I bought the Mavs, we had no season ticket holder base, and so literally it was a matter of just putting a list of former season ticket holders in a white pages back then, you know, on my desk, next to my phone, and making phone calls. Me. Yeah, because if I'm not gonna do it, how can I expect someone else to do it right? So just get on the phone. Hey, this is Mark Cuban. I'm the new owner of the Dallas Mavericks. Unbelievable. You know, I'd like to invite you back for unbelievable. It's not, though. This is my business. But you can't get regular sales guys or something to make those calls once they get to a quarter? You're a guy that's a billionaire. You're making those calls? Oh, but that's all, you know, that's fine and good, right? Because everybody's got their own goals, right? But still, I don't want anybody at the Mavs to be able to say, well, he's not willing to do the work, right? There's, you know, if I walk around, I'm picking up all the papers. I'm not saying go get that picked up. I'm like, okay, that's trash, I'm picking it up. So, but in terms of speed of growth, it's really, you gotta get that first customer first. And then when you get that first, what did you learn? Reiterate, get that next customer. And then hopefully as you learn more and more through the process, then the next one becomes come by even faster. I alluded to it earlier about entrepreneurs being born or built, you know? And I think I knew I was wired to be excited about business. How or why, I don't know. But, you know, and there's certain guys, they have the genetics to jump out of the gym, right? Certain guys, you know, that You know, when they golf, they have the muscle memory and the discipline. You know, Dirk Nowitzki may not be the most talented guy in the NBA, but his discipline and his focus to do what's necessary to be successful, he's willing to do, and combine it with being 7 feet tall and being skilled. You know, it makes him an amazing basketball player. So it's understanding what your skill set is, finding the right place to use those skills, and then going for it. You know, will that make you 250 grand? It depends. If you pick the right industry. You know, I started my first business when I was 12. I was buying and selling baseball cards, buying and selling stamps. Anything I could do to make money, I was hustling and trying to do. So I was in the business, but I wasn't so much where it was, all my friends were into it with me, so they wouldn't know. Baseball cards. Yeah, baseball cards, you name it. I mean, I grew up in Pittsburgh, and so I would, probably even less than 12 years old, I would go up, buy a bunch of baseball cards that I collected, and I would package. I would say, okay, you're guaranteed to have a Pittsburgh Pirate in this package, and I would charge 3 times as much. And I'd set up on this park bench down in the park, down in Scott Township where I grew up, and I'd have these little sales, and it was great. I made money, and I mean, it was, you know, I learned as much about business when I was 9, 10, and 12 as I learned any other time. You know, I was always looking for ways to make money. I mean, I was the kid who would shovel snow. I was the kid who would rake leaves. I was the kid who would do anything to make a buck. And it wasn't just about the money. It was about the challenge of it. It was about figuring out how to do it better, how to do it faster, how to do it smarter. And that's really what business is all about. It's not just about making money. It's about solving problems. It's about finding a need and filling it. And the sooner you realize that, the better off you're going to be. You know, a lot of people think that being an entrepreneur is about having this great idea. And yeah, ideas are important, but execution is everything. You can have the best idea in the world, but if you can't execute on it, it doesn't matter. And execution is hard. Execution is about grinding it out. It's about doing the work. It's about being relentless. It's about not taking no for an answer. It's about pushing through when everyone else is telling you that you're crazy, that it's not going to work. And that's where most people fail. They give up too soon. They don't have the stamina. They don't have the resilience. They don't understand that success isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the most persistent. You know, I've failed plenty of times. I've started businesses that didn't work. I've made mistakes. I've lost money. But the difference between me and a lot of other people is that I didn't let it stop me. I learned from it and I kept going. And that's really the key. You have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to take risks. You have to be willing to look stupid, because if you're not, you're never going to do anything great. You know, people ask me all the time, what's the secret to success? And the truth is, there is no secret. It's just hard work. It's just showing up every day and doing the work. It's just being willing to outwork everyone else. And that's it. There's no magic formula. There's no shortcut. It's just putting in the time, putting in the effort, and not giving up. And if you can do that, if you can outwork everyone else, if you can be a little smarter, a little better prepared, a little more relentless, then you've got a shot. And that's all you can ask for. Because at the end of the day, success isn't guaranteed. But if you don't try, if you don't put in the work, then failure is guaranteed. And that's the one thing you can't afford. All right, so just go for it. Take the shot, do the work, and see what happens. Because you never know unless you try. You know, people always ask me about luck. Were you lucky? And sure, luck plays a role, but luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. You can't control when opportunity comes, but you can control how prepared you are when it does. That's why I'm such a believer in outworking everyone. Because when that lucky break comes, you want to be the one who's ready for it. You want to be the one who can take advantage, not the guy who's scrambling to catch up. I'll give you an example. When I sold Broadcast.com to Yahoo, people called it lucky timing. And yeah, the dot-com boom was happening, but we've been building that business for years. We put in the work. We solved real problems. So when the opportunity came, we were ready. That's not luck. That's preparation. That's doing the work before the work matters. That's putting yourself in position so when luck comes your way, you can capitalize on it. Too many people wait for their big break. They wait to be discovered. They wait for someone to give them a chance. That's not how it works. You have to create your own breaks. You have to make your own luck. How? By being so damn good they can't ignore you. By knowing more than anyone else. By working harder than anyone else. By being ready when your moment comes. Because it will come. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but if you keep showing up, if you keep putting in the work, your moment will come. And when it does, you better be ready. That's why I don't believe in overnight success. There's no such thing. What looks like an overnight success is usually years of preparation, finally paying off. So don't get discouraged if you're not seeing results right away. Just keep working, keep learning, keep getting better. Your time will come. But only if you're ready for it. Only if you've done the work. Only if you've earned it. Because in the end, that's what separates the winners from the losers. Not talent, not intelligence, not even luck. It's the willingness to do the work when no one's watching, when no one cares, when there's no guarantee it will pay off. That's the difference. That's always been the difference. And that's what will make the difference for you.